So data security in India has been a long conversation. We had in 2017 a data protection bill, which was kind of starting point around it, and then Supreme Court gave right to privacy as a fundamental right again in 2017. The past few years have had different versions of data protection bills, but none of them were approved. But we finally have a Data Protection Act 2023. In this video, that's what I'm going to talk about. Let's take a look. So as an acronym, I'm just calling it DPDP. This is an article which I did on Medium, and it talks about in great lengths, but I'm just going to skim through the article and talk about the core values and core things that the Data Protection Act talks about. The first is recognition as a fundamental right. So the right to privacy, this is the first time where the act, where the government, where the constitution recognizes and ensures that the individual has the inherent right to control over their personal information and data. And this is really a game changer because this wasn't used to be the case. So now what it implies is you can ask to be removed from a certain places, and organizations or systems where data is stored and managed, they have to comply with this. There is a constitutional basis, right? And the act basically draws this foundation from Article 21, where there is right to life and personal liberty. This kind of is an extension for it. This also does a lot of empowerment to individuals so that you can exercise control on your personal data. For example, you can make informed decision about where the data is collected, how is it used, how is it shared, with whom it is shared, and etc. There is a consent process that needs to come in. So the consent mechanism needs to ensure, and it will ensure, that individuals are fully aware of how their data is getting used, and they can exercise the autonomy in granting or withholding permission. This basically follows a little bit from the West kind of GDPR conversation, where you have to explicitly give permission for a certain kind of data to be used across in a certain place. There is protection from intrusion. So it kind of protects people from unwanted surveillance and data exploitation, which is kind of a big thing in itself. And there is good accountability, transparency, balancing innovation and rights, which is building a good cohesive digital environment across the country. And you see that, right, with the large financial trend around things moving to a digitized setup, this kind of becomes important. So in essence, the inclusion of right to privacy as a fundamental right in the Data Protection Act highlights the importance of personal autonomy, informed consent, and protection from unwarranted intrusion in the digital realm. Now, there's some interesting areas, for instance, addressing contemporary data challenges. There are different kind of challenges when you deal with your personal data. For example, you give your Aadhaar number, you give your financial information to different banks, and then you find out that very soon this data is you are getting calls for loans and all that, right? These are different data leaks. So these are different challenges, and given that there wasn't a strong act around it, this was happening. With this coming into picture, this kind of lays the cornerstone for stopping unauthorized access and misuse of the data. It also promotes honesty and fairness around data utilization. It kind of let's look at the core objectives. I think upholding privacy, very very important. The aim is to create a digital landscape where individuals can navigate without the constant worry of having their personal data being misused or exploited, data breaches and stuff like that. I don't think this stops the breach as such if somebody gains unlawful access to your data, but it kinds of lays a foundation for what needs to happen in those cases, and we'll talk about that. The quick stop: if you haven't subscribed to my channel and you're still listening, great. This is a very core and cool topic in today's world. Please do subscribe to my channel, like and comment in the channel as well in the video. There's a good depth of conversation happening around promoting business compliance, where it is where the act necessarily talks about how different businesses needs to be clear and comprehensive about how they handle personal data. Also extends trying to balance individual privacy and state interests. For example, if government needs to have situations where governments can access data, personal data, such instances are now more better defined. So there's privacy around. There is a principle of data fiduciary, which is we'll try to define that. So data fiduciary is a term which has been newly coined, and this sorry about that. So entities that deal with user data and provide products and services are called data fiduciaries. In essence, almost all organizations that deal with personal data will end up as a data fiduciary, and they are required by law now to obtain consent from individuals before using their data. So explicit consent has to be taken. There has to be limitation on the purpose, and data minimization and accuracies also needs to come in. So they only take data and permissions for those things which they needed, not like random stuff. For example, an app requesting pointless permissions on your phone or something like that. There are special sections maintained for vulnerable groups like physically challenged or specially abled people. There's minors and stuff like that there's specialized section which kind of talks about it. So there's a process for obtaining consent from legal guardians before processing the data for these individuals. But on the other side, on the flip side, there are still gaps that people are talking about, that the definitions of minor and these special sections aren't that well defined. There's a new role that companies and organizations are required to appoint DPOs, which is data protection officers, and these are required and tasks to ensure compliance from data protection perspective. Now there used to be a role called CISO in a lot of companies, Chief Information Security Officer. I think this additional officer role will kind of roll up to there, and it's an important step in recognizing the data security within large enterprises. There is a good and hefty penalty system that has been built in. So fines can range anywhere from 50 crore to 250 crore, and then the severity of the penalty can be determined by the nature and gravity of the breach. There's a very strong, robust enforcement mechanism which can serve as a deterrent. So this is really, really important. Then there's impact on digital interactions. For example, heightened consent process. Different websites and different apps will now kind of need to add in more checkboxes to gain consent from people. Businesses will need to provide clear and accessible information about what their data they are doing with the data, how they are securing it, etc. And reduced unsolicited communications should also happen, which is really, really bad. I mean, I remember filling up a form for a loan application in one place and then getting called from every known bank out in the world, and we all are troubled by that, and that's a great example. There are deficiencies that have been identified, which people talk about, that the act gives too much freedom to government agencies, but I am not an expert to talk on those, and the earlier draft had some exceptions around it, but those expansions, the newer version expands on those exceptions, allowing potential mass surveillance, which is probably not something. Act also removes the need for government permission to access data for benefits, subsidies and licenses, so probably there's a gap there, and data can be used in beyond its intended scope. So in a nutshell, I think the way government is going to deal with this Data Protection Act, there are certain liberties that people are not liking, and that's what the commentary is around. So yeah, that's what it. So in a nutshell, this kind of grants government the authority to and states to exempt under certain law provisions, but it also gives users the right to correct and access and remove their personal data. Now this is a replacement or withdrawal of the 2019 privacy bill that was introduced earlier, and since the fine is very large, violations would be deterred. So yeah, that's what the video is about. If you like the video, please do comment on it. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.